Everyone, good morning. Is my voice clear?
It's clear.
Okay. So I'm Rema Aldihan. I'm a fifth-year medical student. Today I'll be presenting an overview of the meninges, ventricles, and CSF, and the second part of the lecture will be about the cerebrum. Okay, so can we start now?
You can start.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start off with the meninges. So the brain and the spinal cord are invested by three concentric membranes. The outermost layer, which is known as the Dura Mater, the middle layer, which is known as the Arachnoid Mater, and the innermost layer, which is known as the Paramater. So as you can see here, here's the Dura Mater, and here's the Arachnoid Mater, and here's the Paramater. Okay, as memory aid, the outermost layer has a U out, and the Dura Mater has a U as well, and the innermost layer with an I, Paramater. Okay, so we can remember that the outermost layer is the Dura, and the innermost layer is the Paramater, and the middle layer will be the Arachnoid Mater. Okay? Okay, so we're going to start off with the Dura Mater. So the cranial dura is a two-layered, tough, fibrous, thick membrane that surrounds the brain. As you can see here, it has two layers, okay? So the two layers are the periosteal layer and the meningeal layer. Here's the outer layer, which is the periosteal layer, which is attached directly to the skull. And here's the meningeal layer, which has two folds, forming the dural folds, the falx cerebri and the tentorium cerebelli. Okay, so we're going to illustrate more in these folds later on. Okay, so the sensory innervation of the dura is mostly from the three meningeal branches of the trigeminal nerve. Can anyone tell me which cranial nerve is that trigeminal nerve? Cranial nerve number. Yes, exactly, the fifth cranial nerve. The vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve number 10, exactly. Thank you. Okay, the trigeminal nerve and the vagus nerve, and the upper cervical nerves from C1 to C3. Okay. 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 So as I said, the Dura Mater is formed of two layers, the periosteal and the meningeal. The meningeal layer has two large reflection of the dura, okay, which are known as the meningeal folds, okay? The falx cerebri and the tentorium cerebelli, okay? So the falx cerebri is a vertical, sickle-shaped sheet of the dura. It is in the midline. It extends from the cranial roof till it reaches the great longitudinal fissure between the two cerebral hemispheres here. Okay, the great longitudinal fissure separates the two cerebral hemispheres, and the falx cerebri lies exactly here. Okay, it has an attached border that is adherent to the skull, and the free border which lies above the corpus callosum. Okay, so it lies exactly here, from the cranial roof till it reaches into the great longitudinal fissure above the corpus callosum. So corpus callosum is basically a bundle of fibers that connects the two hemispheres, the right and the left hemisphere. Okay, the other fold is known as the tentorium cerebelli, which is right here. Okay, it's a horizontal shelf of dura, lies between the posterior part of the cerebral hemispheres and the cerebellum. Okay, again, it has a free border that encircles the midbrain, and the attached and the superior surface in the midline is continuous with the falx cerebri, as you can see here. It is separated by the straight sinus. Okay, so again, we have the Dura Mater. The Dura Mater has two layers, the periosteal and the meningeal. The meningeal layer has two folds or reflections known as the falx cerebri and the tentorium cerebelli. Clear? Any questions? Okay. Okay. So moving on to the next layer, which is the arachnoid mater. The arachnoid mater is a soft, translucent membrane that loosely envelopes the brain. It is separated from the dura by the subdural space. Okay, there is a space known as the subdural space. So the dura mater, subdural space, then the arachnoid mater. Okay, The third layer is known as the Paramater. The Paramater is the innermost layer, which is thin and delicate and highly vascular membrane that is closely adherent to the gyri and fitted into the sulci. Okay, as you can see here, it's closely adherent to the gyri. Okay, so between the Paramater and the Arachnoid Mater lies this subarachnoid space. This space has fibrous tuberculi, as you can see here. Okay, and main blood vessels as well as the CSF. Okay, so again, to recap, we have the Dura Mater. The Dura Mater has two layers. Then we have the subdural space. Then we have the Arachnoid Mater, subarachnoid space, and finally the Paramater. Okay. Okay. So these are the cranial meninges. Okay, we have in the spinal cord spinal meninges as well. Okay, so the spinal cord is invested within three meningeal coverings: the Paramater, which is the innermost, the Arachnoid Mater, and the Dura Mater. Okay, so again, the Dura Mater is the outer covering, but here it's a single tough fibrous membrane. So in the cranium, the dura had two layers. In the spine, it has only a single layer. Okay, it envelopes the cord loosely. It is separated from the Arachnoid Mater by the subdural space. Again, it's the same space. The same space is present in the cranial meninges, but here in the spinal meninges there is an epidural space. The epidural space separates the dura from the bony wall of the vertebral canal. Okay, this was not in the cranial meninges. Okay, so the epidural space is only present in the spinal meninges. Okay, and this is important. Okay. The Arachnoid Mater is a translucent membrane that lies between the pia and the Dura Mater. Again, it lies between it and the pia. We have the subarachnoid space, which contains the CSF. Okay, the Paramater is the innermost covering, which is a delicate membrane that closely envelopes the cord and the nerve roots, and it's attached through the arachnoid to the dura by the deniculate ligament. As you can see here, there is a ligament known as the deniculate ligament. It attaches the Paramater to the dura and through the arachnoid mater. Is it clear? Any questions? Clear. Okay. Okay, so here are the landmarks. These are important. You guys have to memorize this. The spinal cord terminates at the level of L1 and L2. The arachnoid, dura, and the subarachnoid space continue caudally to S2 right here, and the Paramater extends downward, forming the phylum terminale, as you can see here. Okay, these are important landmarks. Okay, so moving on to the second part of the lecture, which is about the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid is a colorless fluid that contains little protein and few cells. It's about 150 milliliters. It protects the brain from sudden movements of the head. So it basically acts like a cushion, okay? Then how is it produced? It's produced by the choroid plexus. The choroid plexus are a cluster of capillaries, okay? Which are located in the lateral, third, and fourth ventricles. Okay, so where can we find CSF? CSF is present in the ventricular system, obviously, because we said that it's produced there, along with the cranial and the spinal subarachnoid spaces. Okay. Okay. So the ventricular system, we have two lateral ventricles. These lateral ventricles has the choroid plexus. Okay, that produces the CSF. So CSF flows from the lateral ventricles to the third ventricle through the interventricular foramen, also known as the foramen of Monro. Okay. CSF is also produced in the third ventricle because the third ventricle has the choroid plexus as well. Okay, it produces more CSF. Then it flows through to the fourth ventricle through the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, and finally into the central canal of the spinal cord. So to recap, the lateral ventricles, then interventricular foramen or foramen of Monro, to the third ventricle, to the cerebral aqueduct, to the fourth ventricle, and finally to the central canal. Okay, so this is the ventricular system. How can CSF reach to the subarachnoid space? Basically, the CSF leaves the ventricular system to enter to the subarachnoid space through 3 apertures or 3 openings, okay? As you can see here, we have 2 lateral apertures and 1 median aperture. So the median foramen is known as foramen of Magendie, okay? So again, as a memory aid, median, Magendie, okay? Both starts with an M. And 2 lateral foramina of Luschka. So again, lateral, Luschka, L and L. Okay, so CSF exits the ventricular system into the subarachnoid spaces through these apertures. Okay. Okay, so CSF flows in the subarachnoid space and it gets reabsorbed into the venous system. How? Through these arachnoid granulations, also known as arachnoid redline. Okay, these are these project into the dural venous sinuses, mainly the superior sagittal sinus, for the CSF to get reabsorbed back, okay? Okay, here again, to recap, the CSF pathway, lateral ventricles, then to the foramen of Monroe, to the 3rd ventricle, to the cerebral aqueduct, to the 4th ventricle, to the foramen of Luschka and Magendie, to the subarachnoid space, and finally, it gets reabsorbed back into the system by the arachnoid redline. Okay, clear? Any questions? Okay, so now we're going to move on to the final part of the lecture, which is about the cerebrum. Okay, so the cerebrum is divided into 2 halves, like the cerebral hemispheres, which are separated by the median longitudinal fissure. Okay, remember I told you that the falx cerebri, which is a fold of the meningeal dura, lodges into the medial longitudinal fissure and lies above the corpus callosum. Again, corpus callosum is a bundle of fibers that connects the right and the left hemispheres. Okay, so here when we take a horizontal section of the brain, we can see here the superficial layer of the gray matter, the cerebral cortex, and deeper to the cortex we have the axons, which is the white matter, and within the white matter we have these nuclear masses, which are collectively known as the basal ganglia, the caudate, putamen, and globus pallidus. I'm sure that you have a lecture about the basal ganglia later on. Okay, so the cerebrum surfaces, the superficial layer of the gray matter is highly convoluted to form a complex pattern of ridges, which are known as the gyri, and grooves, which are known as the sulci. Okay, so again, gyri and sulci. Okay, why is this? This arrangement is used to maximize the surface area of the cerebral cortex. Okay, so again, here are the surfaces of the brain. We have each hemisphere has 3 surfaces: the medial surface, the inferior surface, and the superior lateral surface. Okay, okay. So we have 3 sulci. Okay, that divide the hemisphere into 4 lobes. Okay, here's the central sulcus, and here is the lateral sulcus, and here is the parieto-occipital sulcus. Okay, these are used to separate each hemisphere, each lobe within the hemisphere. Okay, so these 4 lobes are named after the overlying bones. So frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Okay? Okay, so each lobe has a function. Okay, the functions of the frontal lobe is motivation, motor function, mood and aggression, and so on. And the parietal lobe is responsible of the sensory information for the reception and evaluation of sensory information. The temporal lobe is responsible of the smell, the hearing, memory, and abstract thought. And finally, the occipital lobe is responsible of visual processing. Okay, does anyone have any questions? No questions? Okay. Okay, so Brodmann's map. Brodmann produced a numbered cytological map of the cerebral cortex based on its regional histological characteristics. So this is a map that separates each part of each each area of the brain, okay, with similar cellular and laminar structures, okay? This is very helpful for the clinicians to identify brain areas, okay? For example, here, for example, the language area, which is Brodmann area number 44, the Broca's area, which is responsible for expressive aspects of language, okay? And here is the Wernicke's area, which is Brodmann area number 22, right here, which is responsible for comprehension and understanding of spoken words, okay? Okay, finally, we're going to talk about the hemispheric dominance, okay? The localization of speech center and mathematical ability is a criterion for identifying the dominant hemisphere, okay? Again, the left, we have two hemispheres, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. The left hemisphere is responsible for analytical thought, logic, language, science and math, and so on. And the brain, the right hemisphere is responsible for the holistic thoughts, creativity, art and music, and so on. There is a misconception that that almost all left-handed people are right. They have right hemisphere dominance, the right hemisphere dominance, and the left and the right-handed people, they have a left hemispheric dominance. This is not true. About almost 96% of the right-handed people and 70% of left-handed people have left hemisphere dominance. Okay, so so most of left-handed people, they have left hemisphere dominance. Okay. So the cerebral dominance become established during the first few years after birth. Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? No questions? Okay. Okay, thank you.